Everyone tells you to start with a single buy-to-let, but I didn't, and I've never bought one on purpose. The numbers don't excite me, the risks are too high for the returns, and in today's market, they just don't make sense. There's a better way to make your money work harder. In this video, I will explain exactly why I avoid buy-to-lets and what I invest in instead to build real income fast. So like many, when you get into property investing, you're told to look at buy-to-lets because it's a safe and easy option to get in and get started. But the more I looked at the numbers and spoke to experienced investors, the less it made sense to myself. The problem with buy-to-lets is the low cash flow. Even at 75% loan to value, meaning you'll put 25% deposit down. For a lot of properties, that's a lot of money to put down, and the returns you're seeing, so on average, a buy-to-let can provide anywhere between £200 to £400 per month. So if you've got, I don't know, 50K, 60K in a property in a buy-to-let, you've used that money as your deposit towards the property, and you're only seeing £200 to £400 per month. That's a very, very low return for your money for the risks associated with it. So when I say risk, the risk being you've got a single tenant in that property who provides you with the income to pay the mortgages and any bills you got around the property. So the risk of having that single tenant is if for whatever reason they stopped paying you rent, then you're stuck with that tenant. They can still live in your house. They have a lot of rights these days as tenants. The only way to evict these tenants is to give them notice and go through a court system to try and get them out of your property, which, who knows, could take 6-12 months to get them out. And all that time, guess what? Who's paying the mortgage? You are. And this is, again, the associated risk. I feel like for the return and the investing point in this property doesn't make sense. The reward isn't there. So you're risking a lot of money to get very little gains in terms of very little cash flow. Also, the returns aren't necessarily the best going down that route as well. So when it came to the numbers, looking at the rental income, it just wasn't adding up for me. And for me, I was trying to replace a 5K income. And I know if you're working a job and you're thinking, okay, I've got a 3 to 5K income per month, how many buy-to-lets do I need? If I'm making £200 a month, that's more than 15 properties that I need to be able to replace even a 3K salary. So I had to look for something different that can give me a better outcome in terms of my cash flow position coming out the asset that I'd acquired. What could I look to maybe see £1,000 plus? And this is where I stumbled across something called HMOs. So with HMOs, I could very easily see £1,000 a month from a single property and upwards versus the £200 you'd get from a buy-to-let. So this started to make more sense to me. Like, okay, cool. So if I've got to get 5 of these to replace 5K in income, then that's more attainable and seems more realistic versus having 25 properties cash flowing £200 a month. That sounded way unattainable, and I'm like, how am I going to do that? That just sounds unrealistic, and it's going to probably take too long to even achieve the outcome. So HMO started to sound more favorable in my ears. I also understood that you can recycle your capital a lot better in terms of there's a lot of value add you can with investing money into doing a refurbishment on this project to convert it to a HMO and then look to recycle the capital back out of the property on a refinance. So again, the ROIs on that were much better than the buy-to-lets, and again, just sounded even more appealing. Like, why would I not do this? Yes, it's a bigger scope of work to convert the house into, let's say, 6 rooms and above to see the outcome I want, but the outcome was very clear that if I was able to deliver on this project, I could have £1,000, £1,500, even in some cases £2,000 from a single property in profit. I would rather have that battle. I would rather jump through those hoops to make that happen than try and go down the route of buy-to-lets and try and get the simple buy-to-lets and accumulate them over time. I also like the fact that you can go down the route of going through planning to change the use classification of the property to C generous, which usually means having 7 occupants and above in a property, which again generates you more rent by having more tenants in the property, and also gives you a higher valuation on the property on the back end because you're valuing the property now based on the rental income it achieves versus just a bricks and mortar valuation. So again, allowed me to be able to recycle my money and allowed me to see a much better ROI on my investment than I would ever see using a buy-to-let method. So again, comparing the buy refurbish refinance models on the buy-to-let versus HMO, HMOs way outperformed the buy-to-let. So it became more and more of a no-brainer exercise for me to go down the route of mastering the skill of how do I go about doing HMOs. So another thing that comes with buy-to-lets is with interest rate being so high at the moment, some landlords are actually looking to sell up their properties just because these properties aren't cash flowing anymore. As you can imagine, if interest rates have gone up, and there's only a set amount of rent you can get from the property, and now your mortgage is now above your rents you're receiving, you can imagine that, okay, well, I had this property where previously I was making £200, £300 a month in profit. Now my mortgage is higher than that. It's £400 or £500 more than my current rent, which means that you're now not making any profit potentially, or even having to top up to keep the asset. So another reason why buy-to-lets aren't performing that well is in high interest rate periods, you are going to struggle to cover your mortgage just based on the fact that there isn't enough profit or there's enough margin, should I say, within these deals to allow you to be able to weather the storm. Whereas with HMOs, for example, you can have that margin, even in high interest rates, because there's so much margin in your profit that you're gaining from this property. If you're hearing this and thinking this is something I actually want to explore and want to do, and you're certain that it's something you want to do 100%, it's something I can help with. I've helped a lot of people get started working alongside a job and building a HMO portfolio. If you are interested in working with myself, there's a link in the description to explore what it's like to work with myself one-to-one to help you achieve this over a 12-month period. One thing I'll say is, if you're going to come into something like this, you definitely want to have at least 20 to 30,000 pounds in capital to be able to get the ball rolling on this. So if that's you, book in a call and we can discuss how we can be of help. So buy-to-lets can still work for you if you're looking for low leverage opportunities and maybe looking to gain capital appreciation over a very long period of time. Then it can be a strategy where you kind of park and forget. But for most, trying to replace their income, and for a lot of people that's the reason why they get into property, is trying to replace their income and having that financial stability, that financial security, then you can imagine obviously buy-to-let being a more tricky route to go down in terms of actually accumulating these properties and getting the outcome you want of replacing your income through your buy-to-let. So what I would advise is, don't follow the crowd. Look at the numbers, let the numbers tell you what makes sense. Numbers online, I've always been a data person. That's how I made my decision on whether I went the route of HMOs or buy-to-lets. The numbers are very clear in one favor, and it just made sense for me to go the extra mile to have the outcome I want from these properties that I'm acquiring. So look, if you're thinking about building high cash flow from property, check out my other videos on how I do this with my HMO properties.